I was reading about Catherine of Siena recently, the saint, and I came across a phrase she used called the total love of God. A kind of willingness to submit one's entire will and being in a relationship of love with God. Now, everyone knows they're supposed to love God, and everyone knows that the love of God, or at least every religious person supposedly knows that the love of God is ultimately the highest value to be attained in the world. But it's good to confront the immediate confusion of the idea. The love of God cannot be like the love you have for things in the world, or even like the love you have for other people in the world. Because ultimately, like, the love you have for other people in the world is ultimately based on a habit of constructing a mental image of what they are thinking, they are like, they are inside, and then how that relates to you. Such that you can when they say I love you back, you understand what they mean. You think you do. But with God, especially if you enjoy playing conceptual games of God like I do, and you get to the point where you start to understand the concept, you realize that you're infinitely far away from His being. There's no modeling God's mind. And insofar as you do, it becomes, God is permanently happy, ecstatic, does not change His mind, does not go from one thought to the other, cannot change, perfectly simple. I mean, He's not like other things. And yet one is supposed to totally love Him with all your heart and soul. And then you realize that what the total love of God is the ultimate existential challenge for being. It is a release of the self into a recognition that the self was nothing but a kind of art project God was working on. And that one's whole existence and the joys that one has at all have all been from, through, and in God. And that somehow the love of God is the grandest mystery of all. It must be just simply returned in a receptive mode of gift-giving, receiving the love of God and then returning the gift. I mean, when you talk about traditional spirituality, and especially like Catholic spirituality, these dynamics of gift-giving have been very prominent for a reason. The total love of God is a commitment to never be out of love with God, which is a very serious commitment. It's ultimately the commitment of Calvary. To be in love with God at Calvary, even. On Golgotha, to still be in love. I mean, that is the limit of what the implication of the total love of God is. But what you get in return is the information and the download of a nectar of sweetness, so delightful and delicious that once tasted can never be removed from your diet, so to speak. I mean, it is a greatness that's just beyond your limits of apprehension. And this is why the love of God is the only ultimate solution to the problem of God. that the love is the solution. Because only in love can you determine yourself forever. Only in love does the will determine itself. Nothing else will do. The total love of God, one's own mind transformed into a vehicle of loving, the totality of one's existence at all times, and a receptive mode of pure gratitude without any preconditions or ultimatums. The time for ultimatums is over, and the time for worship and love has begun. You know you're doing it right if you think about it all the time, because you're just constantly receptive to it, because that's what becomes what's real. And the world becomes a kind of circus act in front of the love. The total love of God. A challenge, a dare, a koan, a riddle, and ultimately a ecstasy.